Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here this evening. Just want to note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for, except for Councilman Merkel at this time. And if you will, we'll begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you're able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to start off this evening's meeting, we're going to have a bittersweet proclamation. For those of us that are familiar with K-9 Officer Mattis, he'll be retiring, and we have a proclamation to award to him. So I'll ask that Council Liaison to Public Safety, Councilman Hypes, join me as we come forward. And if Officer Tappan Mattis will join us, along with Director Robbins.
Well, good evening. This is an unusual retirement for us for sure, and we are grateful for the service of both these guys here, Mattis and Sergeant Tappan. I will tell you, I'm a dog lover anyway. I love dogs, I love K-9s, I love K-9 units, and so I always appreciate just how amazing these dogs are, how smart, intuitive, how easily they learn, how hard they work. But I will tell you, of course I'm biased, but you talk to anybody out there that knows K-9 and police work, they will tell you that this is an unbelievable dog and also an unbelievable trainer. Sergeant Tappan is, I would say, one of the greatest trainers in our country now, honestly, and his ability to talk the dog talk is quite amazing. But Mattis himself is a dog like I've never seen before, and we, as a department, as a city, owe him a great debt of gratitude. I'm honestly lucky to even be alive after one particular incident that many of you probably heard about before that Sergeant Tappan has shared in various venues. But ultimately, it's time, and he's going to be missed and pretty much irreplaceable. But we are grateful for his, how many years of service, Mark? 6 years of service, and they have been phenomenal years for sure. And so we are grateful for that. We're grateful for Sergeant Tappan and his leadership, not only with Mattis, but also in our K-9 unit for the last several years. And we continue to have a phenomenal unit with great dogs and great handlers, often because of what Sergeant Tappan was able to kind of start with us several years ago. So we appreciate that, and we're gonna miss this guy for sure.
Absolutely, thank you. Sergeant Tappan, we very much appreciate your service with this dog over the last 6 years. It's been an amazing experience just to be able to share this community with you and how well you've represented Alpharetta, our public safety department, and this entire community. And it's funny, the two dogs are probably the most famous people in this community, if you're not aware of it. How many followers do?
He's got 3.7 million on TikTok and 200,000 on Instagram.
So it's not even close. That's remarkable. And if you will, just tell a little bit about your experience and about what Mattis has done for you in the department.
Well, I always say when I first picked him, I knew he was going to be a special dog. There's certain, all the time I tell people that he makes me look so much better than I am. He is, as the chief was saying, he's intuitive. He has this about him, that he wants to connect with people. And it's one of the things that drew me to K-9, was the ability that dogs have to bring people together. As a police officer, a lot of times people won't talk to you. But when you have an animal, all of a sudden it creates this bridge. And I saw an opportunity, and the department was wise and kind enough to let me pursue it, using social media to build a bridge between the public and police. And he has been an incredible ambassador. He has all of his work accolades and the things that he's done, but to me, it's the way that he has brought people together that really stands out and makes it special. And then my favorite part about going to work is working with my best friend. And that's the part that's going to be hard on Thursday, is changing vehicles and not having this amazing partner and friend over my shoulder.
Thank you. I know it's got to be a tough day for you as well.
It definitely will be.
Councilman Himes, is there anything you'd like to share? Okay. Well, to note this occasion, I am privileged to be able to read this proclamation by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, for K-9 Officer Mattis. Whereas K-9 Officer Mattis was born on May 28, 2013, and began his service with the City of Alpharetta Public Safety Department in August 2015. He has been the K-9 partner of Sergeant Mark Tappan for over 5 years. And whereas K-9 Officer Mattis has been responsible for over 200 arrests and 7 physical criminal apprehensions, he has located an abundance of controlled substances, guns used in criminal activities, fleeing criminals, and lost people. And whereas K-9 Officer Mattis is the most highly decorated dog in the department's history, he has received a Purple Heart for valor and being injured in service. He has also been named Officer of the Year. And whereas K-9 Officer Mattis has helped raise over $200,000 for charities, including Coins for a Cure, Turning Point, Breast Cancer Rehabilitation, and Georgia Police K-9 Foundation, Mattis and Officer Tappan have performed hundreds of demonstrations and made friends throughout the world. And whereas K-9 Officer Mattis and Sergeant Tappan appeared in A&E's America's Top Dog, episode 4 and 1. They then appeared in the Champions episode and finished in second place. That led to appearances on Entertainment Tonight, Good Morning America, Fox and Friends, and in studio hosts on Live PD. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Alpharetta, do hereby thank K-9 Officer Mattis for his tireless support of Alpharetta and service to the community. We wish him much enjoyment in his well-deserved retirement and proclaim this 15th day of March, 2021. If you will accept that on his behalf,
Thank
please.
you, sir. Matt. Thank you sincerely. I got slobber all over my hand with it. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Correct.
Mattis is a tough act to follow. So next up on the agenda this evening, we do have the consent agenda, and the consent agenda tonight consists of 3 different items. First being council meeting minutes for the meeting of March 1st, 2021, the financial management report for the month ending January 31st, 2021, and the alcoholic beverage license application PH-21-AB-08 Tucano Steakhouse LLC, DBA Pasador Brazilian Steakhouse, 2355 Mansell Parkway, Alpharetta, Georgia 30022. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Councilman Binder and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So then move on to the old business portion of tonight's agenda items, and that consists of one item, consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 46, Traffic and Vehicles, by adding a provision to prohibit non-driver participation in street racing and/or reckless driving exhibitions. This is the second reading. Director Robinson, you once again have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have any additions or new information to add from last week, but we'll be happy to entertain any questions or concerns.
Any questions from council? Councilman Burnett.
Is a similar bill still making its way through the legislature?
Yes, as of last week, it's still got, I would consider, a good bit of momentum, and it sounds like there's a good chance it's going to pass, but of course anything can happen. But I'm on a legislative committee, so we're keeping close tabs on anything law enforcement related, and right now it has a lot of support, it would seem, to go forward.
Any other questions from council? Since it is the second reading, there's no public comment at this time. Do I have a motion from council?
I'll need to read the title.
Thank you, Sam. I knew you were here for some reason.
An ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, amending Chapter 46, Traffic and Vehicles of the Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, by adding a provision to prohibit non-driver participation in street racing and/or reckless driving exhibitions, to provide for an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you, sir. Now, do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that council approve and pass the ordinance to amend Chapter 46, Traffic and Vehicles, by adding a provision to prohibit non-driver participation in street racing and/or reckless driving exhibitions as set forth more particularly in the ordinance read by City Attorney Sam Thomas.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Hypes and a second by Councilwoman Richard. And that motion was to approve the consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 46, Traffic and Vehicles, by adding a provision to prohibit non-driver participation in street racing and/or reckless driving exhibitions, as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So the next item up, well, that will wrap up the old business portion of tonight's meeting, and then we'll move on to the new business portion, where we have several items. And the first of those will be consideration to amend the noise ordinance. This is the first reading. Mr. Thomas, I believe you'll be presenting this.
Yes, sir. This ordinance originated from the discovery that within the ordinance there's a provision, it's in section 26, that deals with construction and demolition activity and noise, and when it can be performed and when it can't, as far as days of the week and hours of the days. There was perhaps a loophole or an exception that allowed work on Saturdays and Sundays if the volume was such that it didn't violate the decibel limitations set within the ordinance. The problem was you had construction activities going on construction sites at 11 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning, and you really lack the ability to test the sound. I mean, you can hear it, but you don't know exactly what it is, and it's a burden on the police department, although they'll do what we ask them to do, but it's a little bit of a burden on them to have to make a call like that, kind of a cold call when they have time to maybe do things, or you can't actually catch the sound. But here it's just the fact that you're performing construction activities outside during the hours that's prohibited. And right now it's basically it provides that construction and demolition activity shall not be performed between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays and before the hour of 9 a.m. or after the hour of 5 on Saturdays or any time on Sunday. But now we have an exception that would allow, we've always allowed emergency work, and that's defined in the ordinance. It's very specific. And this would also allow, it wouldn't prohibit it, interior work that doesn't make noise outside of the facility, which is basically painting, millwork, finish work, that sort of thing. That can be done. But in addition to that, then it would, if there's a situation where the Director of Public Safety, after consultation with the Mayor and Council, determined that a particular project has a need to stay, to work longer, and there's justifiable reasons, we could issue a 10-day permit to allow that work, but it would have to be renewed, and it would have to be approved by Mayor and Council. So that's what this does. It puts a hard stop on construction activities on the weekends.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions from council? Councilman Binder.
Sam, and for clarification, the section that's being revised, that's only dealing with construction, and we have other pieces in there that deal with concert noises or other things, correct?
All of those things are covered in other provisions of the ordinance. This is just the construction activities that take place outside.
So what, the section that was previous, only related to construction, and we're only changing construction?
This portion that we're changing only relates to.
And I know because we've, probably one of the most things we receive emails or contact for is noise. And then there's issues because trying to measure it. So is there any other areas where we're having to measure noise to try to?
Well, I'm not aware personally of any additional issues that we're having. Of course, it's John's department that has to deal with that, and he may have a better idea of what their experience is. But all we're attempting to take care of right now is the immediate issue of hard stops on construction activity during the weekdays. I mean, the weekends.
I think, yeah, because we found that it was based on noise and measuring that, and then that the police officer has to go to headquarters or doesn't have it in his trunk and that kind of thing. So I just want to make sure we alleviate that for all noise issues, whether it's a concert or that. But so that can be maybe brought up on the next time. But I think it's a good thing because it helps simplify how we enforce noise.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sam, there's a new owner at North Point Mall, and for the sake of the argument, say nobody lives over there. And they want to level that thing, and it's in the city's best interest the best interest of the mall, everybody, to bring it online. Are we saying that they have to come in front of the police department, mayor, and council to get a permit to work on Sunday, even though no residents live over there? Thank you.
Saying that at this particular moment, but I don't think a formal hearing is anticipated. I just think it's the consultation that would be necessary. If the chief or director thought that was appropriate, then he would approach council, and council could make a call on that. So it would allow those activities at least to be experimented with and see what's necessary. We won't really know until it starts happening.
Thanks, sir. And just to clarify, I know when I was liaison to public safety at one point, and they were doing Avalon, there was a lot of concrete pouring in the middle of the night. And at that time, it was more of an informal process where the director of public safety would ask me if I thought council would have any objections. And that's kind of how it worked without having to go through a formal application process. I would anticipate, depending on Director Robinson and how he wanted to do it, it would be something similar to that. Any other questions from council? Mr. Thomas, you now have the obligation to read this thing.
I will do that. An ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta to amend, well, I think we probably already did that, so I'm going to flip the page back. An ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend Chapter 26, Article 5 of the Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, the noise ordinance, so as to eliminate an exemption applicable to certain construction activities to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting ordinances and for other purposes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if there's anyone here from the public that would like to speak on this matter, now is your chance to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consideration to amend the noise ordinance as read by our city attorney, Sam Thomas.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and second by Councilwoman Richard, and that was to approve the consideration to amend the noise ordinance as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas. Any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and then Councilman Burnett.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, I appreciate all your hard work with this in conjunction with Chief Robinson and also our Councilwoman Richard for all your hard work on it. I think this is a win for our citizens. When construction's going on Sunday morning or on Saturday morning at 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., it's just egregious. I don't care who's doing it. Nobody deserves to hear that. And with as much infill development as we have going on within our city, it's time that we try and we want to be fair to all involved. We want to be fair to those who build within our city, but we also want to be respectful to our residents. And I think this brings us a huge step closer to doing that. Thank you.
Councilman Burnett.
I entirely agree with the intent behind what the motion in the second is after. I think that equality of life is important, and I know that casting a dissenting vote here is not something that's going to be popular. But I really struggle as an American telling somebody who gets up and goes to work every day that they can't work on a specific day of the week. It feels blue law-y to me from a fundamentalist perspective. But like I said, and I also struggle with the fact that if I work 60 hours in the middle of the week and and Saturday and Sunday are the only days I have to go frame a house or get a tile saw that you can audibly hear from my house. I mean, that's a world we live in for people that do home improvements, and I struggle to, and I know that is not the intent that you all are after, but I struggle to tell that guy or lady that they're wrong for it. That's just my 2 cents. Like I said, I don't dispute the intent of what you guys are after, but that's how I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? I'll go ahead and call for a vote then. And the motion is to approve the consideration to amend the noise ordinance as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass 5-1. So the next item up on the agenda this evening is the on-call stormwater pipelining services for IPR. Director Sisevich.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight is the stormwater items. We've got 2 back-to-back. First one is IPR in the amount of $257,287.50. And IPR, we do pipelining across the city, approximately 1,800 linear feet of pipes, about 36 inches or less in diameter. There are smaller structures. They'll go through and then line the corrugated metal pipes instead of replacing them with concrete pipes, and save some significant amount of time and money. And work will be done by the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council? Director, I have one question for you, just because as I pass by some of the new construction sites on Thompson Street and I see them putting in these on the private development side, what's the responsibility of a developer that uses something that may have an expected life expectancy of 25 years?
Those are most likely on they're not responsibility of the city to maintain. They'll be privately maintained in the private easements. So it'll be up to the HOA and the private areas to take care of those.
Just wanted to make sure. I assumed we were not on the hook for them, but sometimes assuming can be a dangerous business. If there are no other questions from council, I appreciate that. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone wants to come forward at this time, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please approve the funding in an amount not to exceed $257,287.50 to IPR Southeast for on-call stormwater pipelining services contract and to authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilmember Burnett, and that was to approve funding in an amount not to exceed $257,287.50 to IPR Southeast for on-call stormwater pipelining services contract and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. Any comments? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Thank you, Pete. I know it doesn't get you all the glory, but it gets us a lot of headaches if you don't take care of the stormwater, and we do appreciate it. So we'll have one more item on stormwater, and that's the on-call stormwater pipelining services for UAM.
And UAM stands for Utility Asset Management. Public Works is requesting $446,167.80, and they're going to align the pipes that are 36 inches and greater in size. Hence the reason why we're only aligning 1,200 linear feet at a dollar amount, nearly doubling the previous amount. So less work lengthwise, but just takes more materials. And this too will be accomplished by the end of the fiscal year.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council? Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone wants to come forward and speak on this stormwater issue, now's your opportunity. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please approve the funding in an amount not to exceed $446,167.80 to Utility Asset Management Incorporated for on-call stormwater pipelining services contract and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilmember Burnett, and that is to approve the funding in an amount not to exceed $446,167.80 to Utility Asset Management, Inc. for the on-call stormwater pipelining services contract and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. Any discussion? All those in favor? You do?
I'd just like to say these items at $446,000 seem like a lot, but Pete, I thank you for all your work on this because it does extend the life of our stormwater pipes, and it would be a lot more expensive if we had to replace those. And so we've been doing this now for how many years?
Probably going on 7 years.
Yeah. So,
Ages.
I'm sorry. The dark ages, right. So thank you for your work with this, Pete.
Thank you, sir. I'll pass it on.
Please do.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor of the motion to approve, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. Councilman Richard, I don't believe the vote took.
Uh-oh.
Oh, man.
Raise a hand.
Here we go.
Here we go.
All those in favor of the motion to approve, please raise your right hand. And it does pass
Thank you,
unanimously.
Mayor, Council.
Thank you,
Somebody
Pete.
should probably check the batteries before the meeting. I know. You told me.
I think somebody's sneaking in and stealing them. The kill switch.
I told you it's the remote control cars.
So next item up on the old business agenda is Title VI Policy Statement and Agreement. Mr. Drinker, do you have the floor?
That was basically just my introduction. I was just messing with the vote, right? Mayor and Council, this is an item that typically we would do annually. Georgia Department of Transportation gave us a break last year. In the midst of COVID, they did not require localities to do this. But in order to maintain our eligibility for funding through GDOT and federal sources, we have to annually provide documentation assuring those agencies that we will not discriminate based on Title VI requirements, race, color, you name it. So this is something, it's standard fare for us. It's nothing unusual, nothing that we wouldn't do any day of the week, but we do have to adopt the documents within this packet. We have to adopt those every year, and we need to authorize the mayor to execute any necessary documents. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Before I go to any questions from council, if you could, James, just kind of in real English for people, could you explain in brief detail what this entitles? Because I had to go back and read the document to remember, okay, what was Title VI again?
I understand. Yeah, even after years of dealing with it. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act basically addresses discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability. And we have to affirm and assure that we will not discriminate based on any of that for any procurement activities, services, programs, basically anything that the city does. It's really what it comes down to.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Once again, there's a lot of different acts and titles, and I was just like, okay, what was this one? Went back and read it and said, well, we do that anyway. We never would change it, but It is good to affirm it on a regular basis. Any other questions from council? Thank you, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone wants to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Motion to approve. Let me get back to it. I'm sorry. Motion to approve Title VI Policy Statement and Agreement as presented and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilwoman Richard, and that was to approve the Title VI Policy Statement and Agreement as presented and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no.
Hold on, Mayor, I gotta switch batteries.
My apologies. I should have said to raise hands. So we'll move on to the final new business item this evening. The last time we'll need our voting buttons. And this item is the First Amendment to the Fulton County IGA regarding reimbursement for public safety staff working COVID-19 testing sites. City Administrator Bob Regas, you have the floor, sir.
Sir. Yeah, before you tonight is the recommendation to approve the extension of the contract with the county for 4700 North Point Parkway for testing, and now they deliver vaccinations there also. This contract will run March 1st through the end of the year. The amount of the contract will be $160,000. And this, putting this in context, we have been working with the county at that site since April the 1st of last year, when they were just doing the testing, and we were just delivering traffic control, and they agreed to reimburse us for the expenses then. It was a 12-month contract for $160,000, and we were right at that amount, right about now. So we needed to extend it. They give the vaccinations there now, so we added security to it. I think one officer works there in security, the rest in traffic control. So it's a good agreement. It works for the county. It works for us.
Thank you, sir. And I do appreciate you working with the Fulton County administrator to put together this program. It's served our community well for the past almost a year now. So I appreciate that partnership and your efforts in working closely with them. Any questions from council at this time? Councilman Hypes?
I don't know if it's comment or question time, but sometimes county government does not hear compliments often enough. I got vaccinated over there on North Point, and it was a very well and efficiently run operation. You came in, there was virtually no waiting, and yet people were moving through that facility. And I think Alpharetta is fortunate to have such a well-run facility with the help or being run by Fulton County right here in our city limits. And I just want to compliment them for that.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will. You want to go ahead? Oh, go ahead. Make a motion that council approve First Amendment to the Fulton County IGA regarding reimbursement for public safety staff working COVID-19 testing sites.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Councilman Hypes and a second by Councilman Binder. Any other comments? Well, I'll just reinforce what Councilman Hypes said so well earlier. Over the last 11, 12 months, I've been tested at that site twice. Fortunately, both times were negative, but both times it was efficiently run, and I didn't spend more than 20 minutes getting through the line, getting the test, and getting out of there, thanks to the cooperation of Fulton County and our public safety officers that helped manage the traffic. We had very few complaints about traffic in that area, even at the peak when they were passing hundreds of people through there in cars at that intersection every day. And I'll just note that recently in discussions about the testing and the vaccinations, it became so apparent to me how valuable that North Point location has been to all of North Fulton. Specifically, it's more convenient to our residents. But when some of the mayors in South County pointed out that there was no vaccination site south of I-20, and Fulton County goes for about 50 miles south of I-20, it really drove home how fortunate we are that Fulton County invested in that site a couple of years ago and made it available for our community. So once again, kudos to Fulton County for taking care of that business. So that being said, the motion was to approve the First Amendment to the Fulton County IGA regarding reimbursement for public safety staff working COVID-19 testing sites. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the new business portion of tonight's meeting. Council members, we can set our voting buttons aside. And we'll move on to the workshops for this evening. And the first workshop is an update on CD-21-NPDDRI Phase 2 North Point LCI Streetscape Project. Ms. Cook, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to give an update on the process and progress. Of course, this is for the Streetscape project. Just a reminder, in 2020, the ARC notified us that the city, their intent to award $1.6 million for the streetscape design. They required the $400,000 match, and also funding for that has been approved in the TIP Amendment Number 1. In the fall, they did notify us that funding was also recommended for the fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $5 million in federal aid for the construction of a section of North Point Streetscape. That award also requires a 20% match of $1.25 million. And those funds are right now in the approval process. It's within the TIP Amendment Number 2. And staff is currently in the procurement process for consultant design services and should be bringing an award recommendation to council by early May for that first design phase. Based on estimated timelines dictated by the federal funding requirements, completion of the construction for the initial phase should be finished in 4 to 7.5 years. Looks like design will take about 18 months, 18 to 30 months, and that's with that first concept phase that we have. Of course, the goal of the project is to implement the components from the previous planning efforts to make it more pedestrian-friendly, environmentally sustainable streetscape along North Point. Key components include multi-use paths along both sides of the street, enhanced crossings for bicycles and pedestrians. Of course, wanted to make it where people would want to cross North Point Parkway and use the existing amenity, of course, for the Big Creek Greenway. The current intelligent transportation systems will remain in the corridor. These systems are the ones that aid in the coordination of traffic signals, emergency preemption, as well as implement the V2X systems being studied by the IATL lab that's within the summit. Additional technology implementations such as transit signal priority and advanced pedestrian detection at intersections will be investigated as part of this as well. Also, the design team will investigate the viability of reducing the corridor to 4-lane parkway with raised planted medians. Recent traffic forecasts from the Georgia 400 Express Lane project indicate traffic demand along the corridor to be less than a little over 22,000 cars a day in 2046, which is, looking at 2046, of course, they look at what they believe is going to be developed in the area. So that's something when we look at the traffic study, of course, as part of phase 1, we're going to have to make sure that they have all of those numbers correct with the future density that we think will be within that corridor. But of course, getting it right and right-sizing the corridor is imperative, to optimize multimodal connectivity and make it to where people feel like it's pedestrian-friendly and want to cross the roadway. The results of this concept development effort will be presented to the public along with the refined street section, the stormwater concepts, and the initial concept design. And of course, the design phase is intended to design plans for the entire corridor, as well as construction documents for phase 1. So there's no right-of-way services that would be included as part of that first phase. It's just getting to that concept design phase. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Do we have any questions from council? Any comments from council? Councilman Richard.
We've all talked about how important the North Point area is for the redevelopment. I think this particular streetscape project will, along with what we've just recently did with the Gateway connection, will really help drive interest in the redevelopment of that corridor. So I'm excited that we're at this point with this project. But I do have a question, Kathy, to go back to the projections on the vehicle count. Did you say
Yes.
22,000?
Yes, 22,500. That was from GDOT as part of their express lane study, and that was in 2046, which means 4-lane, but that we don't know how much was just incorporating current development and patterns.
Right.
Or looking at the future of mixed use. So that's why when we were meeting with Public Works on who kind of takes the first lead with this concept, that's why community development took the lead as the first concept phase to make sure that future development mixed use numbers, that they kind of get that right in the traffic study.
Because if I remember when we did the placemaking study, I think MKSK also had a projection or existing traffic at that point. I think in 2018-19 it was like 22 thousand. I remember them making the point that it was lower than the amount of traffic we were seeing here in downtown on Highway
Right.
9.
It's over 30,000.
Right.
On Main Street.
On Main
right
Street.
now.
Exactly. So the fact that they're projecting through 46, that number is kind of curious, but
Right.
we need to make sure we get our arms around that.
And we will. That's a good point.
Thank you.
It is, and that is a good point. I think there are some big differences on that stretch, only because Highway 9 goes north and south from Roswell to Cumming. And so there's a lot of people that use that as a major rate to get back home and to get to work and things. But I am curious whether those numbers would hold up, because it does seem low, especially with redevelopment through the corridor. Any other comments or questions from council? Councilmember Net?
I appreciate the sentiment in the presentation, and I think you should go for it and more. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I'll concur with Councilmember Net. I know you've been working on this for a long time, you and your staff, and it's really starting to take shape, and I'm excited for what's coming in that corridor, because I've seen what you've been able to do in other parts of this city, and it's going to be great. So thank you. Look forward to the next step. So that'll wrap up the workshop on North Point LCI Streetscape Project, and we'll move on to the final workshop item, which is the temporary displays in public rights of way. Mr. Thomas, you once again have the floor.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. This workshop was, our office was asked to look into crafting potentially an ordinance that would deal with some issues, and I think primarily, although there are other peripheral issues, but what our main topic right now is these pop-up tents and podiums and chairs and other types of temporary structures that tend to show up sometimes on our sidewalk out front in the town green. And we do believe that we have the ability to regulate that, but, and I've given you some, I think we've given you some background materials as far as First Amendment scrutiny and what we have to deal with when anytime we do anything that relates to speech or assembly or anything like that, because they're very specifically protected under the Bill of Rights. So we have to look at, first of all, where, and where is what we're dealing with right now is the city center, in particular on the town green. And so what is that? Is that an area that we can freely regulate? Well, no, we can't freely regulate it. What we can do is it's considered a traditional public forum, these locations, which means that it's entitled to the highest scrutiny. And that there needs to be, while we have the ability to do a time, place, and manner restriction, we have to do it in the narrowest form possible so as to protect the interests that we're trying to protect, whether it's public safety or some other aspect. It has to be narrowly defined to treat that. Now, there are probably other areas in city center that may not be considered a quote traditional public forum, and they don't have the same strict scrutiny that we have here. And by that scrutiny, also it means it can't be discriminatory in any way. The speaker, the content of the speech, the religion of the people that are involved, the politics of the people that are involved, whatever is, everyone has to be treated the same from a standpoint of being regulated. Obviously, we can't say, and this goes as far as to, if we don't want someone, a nonprofit or a profit or whatever, putting up a tent or tables on the sidewalk, then we won't be able to allow scouts and other bodies like that to put up tents as well. It has to be across the board. I think particularly with respect to the downtown area, we feel comfortable that there are reasons that we could, and people are going to disagree, of course, including some here on the council, but we feel like that if push came to shove, we could defend that type of regulation where we'd limit what goes on out there. So that's what we're about, and what we're, again, we don't want to focus on any particular group or body or people or anything like that. We just want to, I know we want to preserve this town center. I know, we're proud of it. We want it to, this is where people gather. And it's the gateway to our city. And in addition to that, you've got, it's probably one of the most perhaps conflicted areas with pedestrian and vehicular traffic that we have in the city. And it's fairly easy. It's not the easiest thing in the world to go across the hawk signal there, but it sure is easy to kind of get pushed out on the road if you're not careful sometimes. So I think that's what you're trying to achieve. If I'm wrong, let me know, or if there are other areas you want us to pursue so that we could bring something to you in a draft form. We'll be happy to do that as well. One thing I think we've mentioned potentially as a possibility in the past, but we have looked into this very carefully, and we don't think it is. We don't think that we can limit those who want to put a tent up or want to solicit if it's done in accordance with allowable provisions. We cannot keep non-residents or people who don't have a presence in Alpharetta out. We just can't. We found several cases on that where that was declared unconstitutional. So that's one thing we can't do. So I wanted to mention that, Don, because I know you and I have discussed that several times in the past. But unfortunately, that's just the way that is.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, this is a workshop. This is just feedback. This was something that council had brought to your attention. And I appreciate you and your team doing the research to make sure that we're working from the facts and we're not making decisions rashly. Councilman Hypes.
Although I don't know where we will end up, I fully support the initiative. I'm happy to put my name on this initiative. The one thing that's a little bit different than what I perceived in my mind's eye is there's been a lot of discussion about the town green. And in my mind, the public streets and the public sidewalks belong to the city. And I'm just don't know where you'll end up with this, Sam, but if somebody wants to stand there and preach the word of God, God bless the First Amendment, but somebody wants to set up a structure, a table, a chair, and set up camp and live rent-free to further whatever their venture is, and I'm 1,000% on board. I don't care what it is. It's a content-neutral assessment for me. I believe the city has to be able to control if, when, and where, time, place, and manner, these things will exist, whether it be around North Point Mall, along Old Milton Parkway out in front of Avalon on the public sidewalk. I mean, town green is too specific in terms of an ordinance for me. This is anywhere in the city limits as far as I'm concerned, and then I will defer to your legal input on that. But
no, I think there are other areas that would probably definitely qualify for that as well. So
my concern is twofold. It is the tail wagging the dog. It's people telling us where they can utilize our public space for their personal benefit, as opposed to making that space available to everybody and not to just one group. And then secondly, and most importantly to me, is the slippery slope argument. If you find a particularly valuable spot, let's say, on the public sidewalk, why shouldn't the next person put a tent right next to them, and then to the right of that one, and then to the left and to the right, and before you know it, we've got a downtown bazaar on our public sidewalks, and maybe they end up on, the town green or in the middle of the baseball field at Wills Park, because that's public space. I mean, we have to be able to control if, when, and where things like this take place. And so my feedback is I wouldn't want to make it too geographic centric.
I hear you.
My intent was for the city of Alpharetta and to have some flexibility in there where permits would be granted. But again, this would be content neutral in terms of how it's applied, in terms of how it's written.
I appreciate that feedback. That's helpful.
Councilman Burnett?
And Councilmember, perhaps you can jump in if you want, but Sam, is there a downside suggesting that you said that it was broad, and I think from an equal protection standpoint, without vocalizing support for the idea of an ordinance, if you looked, do you have to do the same thing throughout the entire city? Is there a negative impact if you only choose 3 or 4 pieces of property? Does one make your case better than the other? I'm just asking questions because that goes beyond what I can find on Wikipedia with respect to the Bill of Rights.
Well, obviously we're charged with being as consistent as we can be, but there are areas where I think you can make valid distinctions, particularly where you have areas that are more pedestrian oriented and that sort of thing.
Can I ask you a question there?
Sure.
Let's start with keeping people safe. I understand the concept of having a tent outside could be very crowded, could potentially be a hazardous situation on the town green towards Highway 9. I've seen 1 million people out there. I'm sure it can be dangerous. But I don't know that the same thing holds in other parts of town. So my question back to you guys is, I believe in keeping people safe, but if you don't do the same thing in one part of the city versus another, does that damage your ability to defend yourself with an ordinance?
Well, if you've got valid distinctions that you can make, for example, you take, for instance, speed limits where there's not that much traffic or not, versus where you have areas where there's a lot of traffic and you have speeding problems. I mean, you use different numbers in different areas, so potentially there is that, but we would try to stick as consistent as we could.
So it doesn't matter, 26 square miles, it's in your opinion, you would rather see it narrow or you would rather see it applied equally throughout Alpharetta? Just as a
Well, I think we can explore that. We feel very strongly here that it can be done, but we feel like it probably just as well could be done in other areas of the city. We hadn't focused on that, but we will.
I'll have more later.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Sam, for working on this. I know this is kind of a precarious ruling, but at the same, I know also that last week the Supreme Court ruled against Georgia Perimeter College, and last year they ruled against Georgia Tech because they were prohibiting people from passing out religious brochures and speaking on their Christian faith on the campus, even when they gave them a specific area to do that. So I was glad to see that ruling coming out of the Supreme Court because it's egregious. This, however, there's got to be some way we can allow it a certain amount of times a year, because what we're experiencing are charities and things like this, and without picking favorites or whatever, I fundamentally believe our citizens, just because they live in a more affluent area, that they have a right not to be bombarded constantly by the same group asking for money on our sidewalks. I saw people with one particular group, they were walking all the way around this tent just to get away from them asking for money and things like that. And I personally think our citizens have a right to decide if they want to donate to whatever group they want to without any egregious attempt by some charity or people raising funds on a constant basis. So we'll see.
All right, well, I hear your comments.
Councilman Biner?
Yes, sir. I have just some confusion based on what's on our agenda. So why are we discussing this? You brought it forward, but it's for nonprofit organizations we're already talking about on our agenda. It's on the agenda. It says a recent trend has been noted of nonprofit organizations setting up tables, small tents, or other displays. So what's the issue? Like, is it a quality of life thing or obstruction? What?
I mean,
I brought it, Sam didn't bring it forward. So that's a tough one for Sam to answer. But if I don't want to hijack your presentation, so I mean, I'm happy to weigh in.
Yeah, no, I'm just, because he's saying we got to be careful not saying why we're here or the group, but then on the agenda it says nonprofit organizations.
If I had my druthers, that wouldn't be, written into the.
that just may have been included on there.
Yeah.
We were intending on treating commercial and nonprofit the same.
Yeah, I can say in terms of bringing it forward, I don't care who it is, I don't care what it is. What I care is it's a structure, right, and they're living rent-free on public property. So to Council Member Burnett's point about, all over the city, if somebody wants to set up something and sell something on the public sidewalk in front of Brewster's on the east side of 400 on Old Milton Parkway, I got a problem with that. Go pay rent somewhere, or stand there with no structure and sell whatever it is you're selling with nothing else and exercise your First Amendment rights. But taking up rental space on public property, it's more egregious in some places than others. But once you start drawing lines about, we'll stop our prohibition here, but allow it after you cross a line, you start drawing lines, then it gets blurry. So from my vantage point, it's within the city limits, and somebody can come and apply, and it should be within our discretion. The way the city streets are used, we don't like certain sentiments being displayed as people go through the city streets. We know by law we can control what sentiments are said in our city streets. Parades, whatever.
So so for the who then, is it, how can we justify if it's is it assembly or is it of people, what can we do to put, because assembly for a nonprofit message or assembly to sell my energy drink or what?
Well, I mean, it really, they're part and parcel of the same amendment, so to speak. So, it's oftentimes that it involves both assembly and speech. Almost all of them do to some extent, just depending on who's there, how many are there, the crowds that come around, et cetera. But yeah, we would, again, I'm not 100% sure I understand your point.
How are we going to frame this? Is it if you're communicating your message, whether anything or that you can or cannot assemble, or if you're raising money for a nonprofit or selling a what are we talking about here?
Anybody who wants to occupy the city right of way,
yeah,
for the purpose of whatever their intention is, if they can occupy it, but they can't put structures up. That's the main thing. Is what we're trying to get at. Okay. Is keep the tents, keep the chairs and the tables, because those become problematic and hazards.
So are we talking about the green, or are we talking about the sidewalk?
And we're talking about the sidewalk.
Okay.
Now,
Talking about public
yeah,
Oh,
but I mean, from a safety standpoint, it's more critical on the sidewalk, but yes, it's the entire green.
so we're talking about no chairs on the green? Like, my kids play there a long time.
Well,
I get tired.
we can set the circumstances under which,
How so?
by specifying.
Specifying how? Like, how do you, if you look like you're playing ball with your kid, then you can bring a chair, but what, I'm asking, I don't understand why we're here or what the issue is, and I
think we're here because people are concerned that the public rights-of-way are being taken over by people who want to use it rent-free as a place to put a structure to sell whatever they're selling. And whether you're commercial or you're nonprofit, you're selling something. So that's what I understand John's concerned about is putting up a tent and taking up a good portion or just a portion of the sidewalk. That's what I understand it. And maybe John or someone else can articulate it better, but that's what we were.
So selling, like fundraising or selling energy drinks or cookies,
Yeah.
but not preaching
Well, even
your religion.
Religion, if you're putting up a tent.
Okay. And then, are we giving them an area, because Pro Tem Mitchell brought up a good point on, they were given an opportunity to, at different times or different places, so would we
Yes,
provide
we'll
them?
make some opportunities available. That's what we have to do. We have to structure it such a way that they will have an opportunity, but it won't be carte blanche by any stretch of the imagination.
Is this a public safety issue?
I would view it as mostly a public safety issue. There are probably other issues that pertains, I would assume it relates to the impediments and the possible impacting of pedestrian traffic out into the roadway and all of those things. But I think it's otherwise it's just part of the general. I would not say that you could get by with aesthetics alone, but it's a factor to be taken into consideration as far as the way you're presenting and marketing your downtown area.
If we sold the green, maybe because they talked about the green, so it's a public green right now. If we sold it to a city center and they created and they bought it, could they say that stipulate more? Would they have more freedom to stipulate than we would on how that green's used, that you can't be used for?
You mean if
it becomes private?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think that helps a little bit.
Maybe if we're told to, we'll move forward and we'll put something together that you can look at it and maybe it'll make a little more sense on paper.
I know. And the other one too is the intersection. So I noticed that like during November where we had intersections, it didn't matter who was there that weekend, but where there would be all 4 intersections blocked off with signs and blocking crosswalks and making it hard for pedestrians and having vehicles passing through red lights. So could we use that as saying that might not be the best place to assemble right there on the corner of the crosswalks?
Well,
all throughout the city?
If you're talking about just pure assembly, that's more difficult to do in and of itself rather than the structures. I think we're more concerned about the structures. I think if somebody wants to show up and preach on a street corner, they can do that. They just can't put a podium up. That's what we're trying to stop. We're not trying to stop speech.
so I don't understand how the
Well, yeah,
structure.
I don't know how to change your mind on that. I mean, that's just.
I understand what a structure is, but, I don't know, okay.
Councilwoman Richard?
Thank you, Mayor. To give some insight to the question Councilmember Binder was asking about how did we get here and why is this here on the workshop, Councilmember Hypes, myself, and Mitchell had conversations about what had been existing with the entity that's been out there for a couple of weeks now, and I expressed an interest in understanding what we as a city can do from a management standpoint. I see this as on public sidewalks as a public safety issue because I've witnessed the amount of pedestrian traffic coming across at the Hawk signal on 9 and this large structure and the number of folks that have been around this structure that are staffing it. And this is March. It's not the middle of the summer where we are jam-packed downtown on a regular basis, especially on the weekends. So I was interested in having a discussion about how do we, can we manage this? Can we look at a permit process so that we can effectively manage the number of entities that want to set up tents and tables on our public sidewalks? I think that's a fair discussion to have. Regardless if it's commercial or nonprofit, that is not the issue to me. It is the impact on our public sidewalks and the safety issues that it creates in a very dense, pedestrian-friendly environment.
Councilman Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the premise. If you want to, quote unquote, skin the cat, I think that Councilmember Hypes is right in the way that you would like to look at it. I do not and will not ever agree with the sentiment of we don't want you here. And that's just, man, that just burns me up. One of the questions that I have, and this reminds me of the conversation that we had, I don't know, a summer or two ago about when it came up about banning vape shops. And I said, well, you don't have to ban it. You can make it in a sort of distance requirements, a way you can encourage the behavior in the market that you would like to see. Now, I don't want to abuse that, but it was a better way to go about it. I think the public safety argument is the only one that is defensible with keeping people safe, because when you talk about, and if it's anything other than that, I'm out, because, you know, the First Amendment protects 5 things, and outside of the press, you know, this touches on all 4 of them, and I don't like the way that feels. And that's just me being really candid about it. I think that one of the things, if you were looking to do it, and I don't know, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to tell you why I agree with it and then why I disagree with it. I think that you could issue permits by day based on the square footage of the market rents around you, so that it didn't give somebody a favored deal if you're off Brookside Parkway and it's $15 a square foot to stand out there. But I don't want to be in that business. The other thing is, I don't really want to live in a country where you can't sell Girl Scout cookies in the public domain, because I like Girl Scout cookies and I like them to be able to do that. And I understand that it is a baby in the bathwater thing, and even though it's ugly, I'm still inclined to vote no if it's anything other than keeping people safe. I don't think there's another way to go about it that I could support in public, but I think that there's a case to be made that it isn't safe. And I saw downtown Alpharetta over the course of the weekend as I drove through downtown several times, and I do not know the structure of which you speak, but I saw a sea of people. And there is definitely something to that. So if y'all are willing to frame the argument in a way that goes in that way, I could be persuadable. But I am not in the we don't want you here. Thank you, sir.
Well, I haven't said anything yet, so I'll take this opportunity. First of all, I don't believe anybody is saying you can't be welcome in Alpharetta. And so I went back and looked through this closely, and I understand the confusion about why we're here and the not-for-profit that's put here, but in the report, it just says that it's been noted that not-for-profit organizations have been setting up tables, small tents, and other displays. And that's what prompted this issue to come in front of us at this point. So the item isn't about free speech at all. As Sam has stated repeatedly here, this wouldn't stop somebody from preaching on the corner. It wouldn't stop somebody from standing there and waving a Black Lives Matter sign or something to that effect. So I'm just trying to corral all the comments I've heard, because y'all have all had great points to make. And so as I listen to it, I think the critical thing here is, and one, we do have to have a reason, which I think specifically on sidewalks, public safety is an issue. And I am curious, though, having just passed the noise changes earlier, is there such a thing in the legal term of a public nuisance rather than just a public safety?
Yeah, we define a nuisance in our statutes. They typically, I don't think that we've seen something that I think would qualify under the law as a nuisance at this point. But yes, we definitely have on the books the ability to abate nuisances.
Well, and the reason I'm curious about that is part of creating an environment like downtown is that we want it to be welcoming for people to bring their families downtown. And I've been in cities like San Francisco where my wife didn't feel comfortable walking down the street. And we've got a great community, and I don't foresee issues, but we have to be cognizant of everything we do in unforeseen circumstances. And so in relation to Councilman Burnett's question about selling Girl Scout cookies, I completely understand that. But I also understand that constitutionally, we can't allow Girl Scout cookies to set up a tent and sell them on a sidewalk if we're not going to allow someone to sell sex toys there. And I don't particularly want everybody selling anything on there. And so we have to be very thoughtful in what we allow. Now, whether we have to do it right now or not is a different discussion. But I also say, over the years, as we've watched Alpharetta evolve, issues and challenges that we never would have believed would be a problem in our community have arisen, from multiple different causes and multiple different situations. Who would have ever believed that we'd have problems with street racing in Alpharetta? And so I think it is worthy of this discussion, and this is just the first public unveiling of this concept. And so I think it's worthy of to keep this thought process and figuring out what makes sense and what doesn't. So I support this process. We'll see what comes out of it. But I certainly understand that I had seen a couple of those tents or whatever you want to call them, but I just saw them every other day for a couple of days, and it didn't really. But then when I started talking to other people who had been by there every day for a week and seen it constantly, it could become an annoyance, because if we have one, we can have 12. And if we've got 12, do people still want to have to walk through that gauntlet of people selling things on the sidewalk to get to the restaurant they were going to, or do they just go to Avalon or because it's private property or something? So that's just where I am. I'm not really putting a stake in the ground on any of it, but I think, unfortunately, it's something we need to think about. And even if we don't do anything about it, be prepared should we have to. But that's where I am. And Councilman Hypes, I believe, next, and then Councilman Binder.
Well, I find it to be an interesting city topic because of safety, quality of life, et cetera, and people's rights. But in response to an issue brought up by Councilman Burnett, nobody is stopping a Girl Scout from knocking on the door and selling cookies the old-fashioned way. Nobody's stopping anybody who has a tent from going and knocking on door unless they don't go through the proper solicitation tag requirements that maybe the city and or a subdivision imposes in order for that to happen. Point being that even without a structure, there is not unfettered right to go out and approach folks to sell your ideas and your wares, either at your own door for your house or on the street. The issue for me is and will always be, the structure setting up camp. So to your point, if somebody stood there with a box of cookies and you walked by or I walked by and said, would you like to buy a box of Thin Mints? And they don't have a table, a tent, or a chair to do that, they would not be running afoul of an ordinance as I would envision the ordinance being. And I think the brighter the lines, the clearer the distinctions, and the greater the expectations people will have if we create these bright lines, assuming such an ordinance is drafted and passed. But I have no interest in stopping people's speech. I have an interest in stopping them from blocking the sidewalk and creating traffic jams at hawk lights, et cetera. That's where my interest lies.
Councilman Binder.
Forget who said it, but when it comes to, a few of our issues that have come up recently, and it was, I think, the Safe Hotels one where, well, this is not initiated by public safety, so I can't support it. I think we should hear from the chief next time around to say how much of a public safety issue this is. And same thing with the skateboards. Well, who's going to enforce this? How's this going to enforce? I'd hate to use police resources on this. I'd like to have that same opportunity that be answered. I will say I'm in agreement on, just like I was on the skateboard, the transportation issues. That the road is a means of transportation. And when you're affecting the means of what that's built for, it makes sense when you're talking about the structures. They're impeding it. I get a little nervous on the chairs because then I hate to run into a American Disabilities Act situation there where somebody needs a chair, but I can see the point of it being blocked when you're using it for the mode of transportation. When we talk about all public spaces, I get real nervous when we set the gauntlet that broad. But if it's a public safety issue that's brought up and Chief Robinson feels like that can be enforceable, and I know we've been told multiple times that we're at a shortage of police already, so I'd hate to use their resources on this, but if they don't deem it necessary. But those are some answers that I would look at, and I'd be more than happy to explore the sidewalk and road issues, because I agree with you, the streets are already crazy, even with what we have and I love it, where we have our vendors along Milton Avenue having table fronts, so it takes off sidewalks, and with kids, you gotta make sure everyone's not on the road using that. So adding to that just creates a little bit more chaos. So I'd be fine looking at that.
Okay, and we'll certainly talk about this with Chief Robinson as well.
I think it should be fair all around when everyone's running the gauntlet.
We're here to be directed. We'll bring it back in another workshop, or work with John, or however you want us to do it, or we'll just go back to tending to 50,000 other things we're working on right here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't think we're reinventing the wheel here. I know in the city of Atlanta, over in the 5 Points area, they provide permits for folks who sell hats and caps and different paraphernalia. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just trying to provide public safety for our citizens, and also some kind of law and order and some kind of peace of mind that folks are not bombarded constantly by people wanting things. So thank you.
Welcome.
Any other comments from council? So Sam, you think you have enough out of this to move forward? Maybe circle back with us at a later time?
Yeah, I'll circle back with you, and maybe, if nothing else, have a talking point type ordinance that we could look at a workshop again with John.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And perhaps Councilman Hypes, as liaison to
Yeah.
public safety, can help facilitate that. Okay?
Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. So that'll wrap up the workshops for this evening, and now we're left with the public comment. Anybody would like to come forward, speak your piece in the public comment portion of tonight's meeting? Now's your opportunity. Seeing no one come forward, we'll close public comment. Do we have any reports this evening? Seeing none, we'll close.
Have to do this.
Just under the wire, Mr. Regas
Yes, sir.
comes forward.
Y'all recall back in the fall, we invested $50,000 with the CVB to do an Expedia campaign. It was a 4-month campaign that ended in late February. And Janet reports through Expedia, in that time, they booked 11,758 room nights. So that's pretty good. I think Janet feels really good about that. Thanks the council for the investment in the CVB, in the hotels. So any questions about that, I'll be happy to take them.
Any questions for Mr. Regas on that? Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your efforts on that. It's nice to see those occupancy rates starting to go up. Well, if there's no other reports, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time this evening, and we are adjourned.